Hi, welcome to the Math Essentials podcast. In this podcast, we're going to do a quick review of what a tangent is, tangent of an angle, or how to solve the tangent of an angle and the tangent of a line. And then in the next part of the podcast, or part 2 of the podcast, we're going to do a quick overview on what this looks like on a calculator. So to start off, we're going to start with the formula, and that is this right here. So the formula to solve the tangent of an angle. So if I had a triangle and I want to solve an angle, so I want to know what that angle of elevation is. Okay, so to define it, remember that the angle of elevation is the angle in which the line, or this line here, is elevated from the horizontal plane, or this line here. And so to calculate the angle of elevation, what we need to do is use this formula. Tangent of the angle unknown, or theta, is equal to the opposite over adjacent. Now remember that this is my opposite, and this is my adjacent. Okay, so for example, if my opposite in this case was a 3, and my adjacent in this case was a 1, then I could easily calculate that out. One of the relationships I want to show you very quickly before we actually calculate the tangent is that slope, which is rise over run, is related to that tangent of angle of elevation. I can calculate the angle of elevation if I am given the slope. So my slope, or the tangent of the slope, is equal to the angle of elevation. So slope in this case, so going back to my example and my numbers, so if I had a slope of 3 over 1, then I could use that number there because it's the same thing, the opposite over adjacent, or 3 over 1. So what I would have to do is to calculate out what the inverse tangent of 3 is, and that would get me my angle. So to do that, we need to learn about how to use a calculator. And so let's look at some examples. And let's bring up a calculator. Now your calculator may look a little bit different, but all scientific calculators have a couple of features in common. So pull my calculator up again. So if I had to calculate the tangent of 83 degrees, okay, so if I wanted to calculate what that was equal to, then on this calculator here on the computer, I would need to type in 83 and I would need to find tangent. Okay, and I get a number of 8.14. Okay, so that's how I would go about calculating it. Now, some people's calculators, I'll just clear that. On some calculators, you may have to press tangent first, and then the number, and then hit equals. On this calculator and on some calculators, simply having the number in first and then pressing the tangent will give you your value. So if we were to calculate the tangent of 5, I would go 5 and then I would hit tangent and I would get another number. Now remember what this number is equal to. This number is my slope of my line, right? In other words, it's my opposite over adjacent value. So when I'm given the opposite over adjacent value, like right here, and I want to calculate the angle, I have to do what's called the inverse of tangent, or in math, we say tan to the -1. All it means is the other operation, or the inverse operation. So to do that on a calculator, first on this one here, what I have to do is I have to put in the number 5317. Okay, so 0.5317. And then I'm going to find the inverse button. Now, my inverse button on the computer says INV for inverse. Yours may say second function. It may say 2NDF. Okay, it may have a shift. So you're looking for a button that will allow you to take the inverse of tangent. So when I click on the inverse, you can see that all of a sudden all these numbers pop up and they're the inverses. So the inverse of tangent is tan to the -1, and so I'm going to press it. And what I get is about 27, 28 degrees. That's my angle of elevation. Okay, so again, we'll do another example. So this will be for the 3.4874, so 3.4874. Now that is my slope value. And so in order to calculate my slope value and to turn that into an angle of elevation, remember I press my inverse or my second function or my shift, and I look for my tan button. And I get about 74 degrees. Okay, and that is my angle of elevation. Okay, now let's go back to our original example and let's calculate what this angle of elevation is. So if I had a 3 to 1 slope, to do that, remember that I have to do the inverse. So let's pull up the calculator and let's figure out what that angle of elevation is. So remember, I put my number in, and because I'm given the slope and I'm going to angle, I have to do the inverse, and I get 71 degrees. So that means that this angle here, the angle of elevation on my example, is 71 and a half degrees from the horizontal. Okay, so hopefully that clears up how to use your calculator. The only other thing I'll make sure is that your calculator is set on degrees. So make sure that you check that out. It should say DEG, or it should have a button for degrees. And I hope that was helpful.